Hi there, class. Dr. Casino again. So today we are going to be talking about our supplemental discussion for Meritocracy chapter. I believe this is chapter 5. So there's a couple things in there I want to talk about and expand a little bit, and a couple other things that I wanted to bring up as supplemental issues that might be relevant to some of the things we're going through right now as a society. So the basic idea of this whole book is this distinction between having capitalism and market exchange as a way of structuring the economy versus having capitalism as a way of structuring society. And those are two very different things. And I think they get conflated a lot. So when people are socialists, for instance, they're not talking about getting rid of capitalism as the way of structuring the economy. I think we all agree, I think even hardcore communists at this point agree, that having capitalism that is supply and demand set the price of things is the best way to distribute goods and services. The question is the extent to which you have to have the rest of society built around that as well. And that's an open question. So that's what this book is starting to get at, the idea of the consequences of structuring society rather than just the economy around the ability to access capital. So a lot of this chapter really deals with the issue of human capital investment. So let's talk a little about that and what that means. So we talk about capital investment. Generally, what we're talking about is investment in factories, building something, productive capacity. And the idea is with capital investment, you can make factories more productive by investing more money in them. So imagine you've got a very simple factory, and that factory is going to require a lot of people to work on it. Now, I can make the factory more productive and make the people who work there more productive by automating the factory more, putting in more equipment and more machines. And the extent to which I do that makes that factory more productive, meaning every person in there is more productive. So 1 hour of work makes more of whatever those people were making. So capital investment is there to make things more productive. And it's generally considered to be a good thing. There are certain circumstances where capital investment doesn't make sense if labor is very cheap. But in general, investing more capital in a process is considered to be good because it means in the future you have to do less work to get more out of it. The same holds true for human beings. So we talk about human capital investment as being the idea that by spending money on your education, on your training, on all sorts of things that these money we put in there will make you more productive. You'll be able to do more with your skills. And sometimes this can be very basic, right? If someone's a really good artist, well, human capital investment might mean I'm going to give them equipment. So I'm going to give them equipment, the canvases and the paints and whatever else they need in order to do their art. Well, that's capital investment, and that makes them more productive. They're able to make more money and do more with what they have. Most commonly, though, human capital is going to refer to education and training. The idea that I'm going to invest money in you in form of education, both primary education, K through 6, secondary education, high school, and tertiary education, that is college. And invest that money in you with the idea that it's going to make you a better worker and it's going to make you more productive and maybe even happier. Who knows about that? But I'm going to put human capital investment in you. The idea is the more human capital I invest in you, the more productive you're going to be going forward. And so a lot of this chapter of the book is about how much human capital gets invested and how that human capital gets invested. So sure, we have universal education in the United States. So universal K through 12 education, everyone does it. The United States was actually among the early countries to adopt universal K through 12 education. So in New England, we actually had universal K through 12 before the revolution, in this 18th century. But they stopped there. So we're investing money in people through K through 12, and then we're investing a lot of money in people for college education. But the degree to which we're investing is enormously different across different areas and across different states. So in the book, they talk about the median spending on K through 12 education, which is about $12,000 per pupil per year. So on average, median. So basically means if you line up all the children in the country from one end to the other and line them up from the one who got the least amount of time spent on them to the one who got the most amount of money spent on them, the one in the middle would have had $12,000 per year spent on them. Now, it's a good idea to use the median here rather than the arithmetic mean or the average. Average, you know how you get an average. You add up all the numbers, divide by the number you added up. So it's a good idea to use the median because the median is more resistant to outliers. That is, if I've got one kid over at the extreme end of the distribution where we spent $100,000 educating that kid, Well, that's going to raise the average a lot, but it's not necessarily going to raise the median by very much, because we're only counting if you're in the middle or not. So it's good to use the median, but even that median hides a lot of differences. So $12,000 is your median spending, but as the book points out, it can go way, way higher than that. So some days you're going to have much lower spending, spending of $3,000 or $4,000 per pupil per year. In other areas, especially when we get into states like New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, we can go much higher than that. We can have investments of $20,000 per student per year. Now that's in the public school system. If we go outside the public school system and start looking at the private school systems, then we can have investments in children, in human capital investments, educational investments in children that go well beyond that. So we're talking about the very highest end of private schools in the United States. We can be looking at schools that are spending nearly $100,000 per year per child on education. Now that is good in some sense and bad in other senses. Right? It's good in that if you're getting a school that's spending $100,000 a year on you, you're going to get anything you want, right? We're talking about people who have private tutors for each individual class. So you go to your class, you go to your school, you might have a school with a very small class, 10, 12 students per instructor. But then when you come home, you're going to have a private tutor for that same class, and they're going to help you out with it. And you're going to have a different private tutor for each one of your classes. And as a result, your parents might be spending $100,000 on human capital investment in you per year. Now, the upside of that, again, is you're going to learn a lot more. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to learn doesn't mean you're going to learn 8 times as much as someone who had $12,000 invested in them. There are marginal decreases in returns on the investment, meaning that once you get to a certain level, and we think that level is probably somewhere around $15,000, $20,000 a year, extra above that doesn't really do very much. So there's not the big difference between 10,000 and 15,000, or between 5,000 and 10,000 is really huge. The difference between 10,000 and 15,000 isn't quite as big. 15, 20 is a little smaller than that. The difference between 20 and 25, not much of a difference in the outcomes. If you get up to a difference between 80 and 85, it's an even smaller difference. So that raises the question, why would anyone put that much money into the human capital investment in children if the gains are not that big? And the answer is, well, you've got lots of money. And as the book points out, the only socially acceptable way for you to pass down that money, pass down your success, is not through inheritance, but rather through having your child also join the meritocracy. And the way to get them into the meritocracy is, in fact, to shovel all this training, all this education into them. So it's bad for families in that they have to spend shocking amounts of money on education that no one's ever spent in this past, right? No one's ever tried to push children this much, to force this much human capital into them. Now, again, it's necessary because it's competitive to get into Princeton or Harvard or Yale. You have to do this in order to get into these super elite schools. All right, so the parents are doing this. It's bad for them because they have to do this, but it's also bad for the children. I mean, think about what your life is like if you go to school, and when you're done with school, the next thing you're going to do is come home and then go to 5 tutors after that and spend all weekend getting tutored and all summer getting tutored and doing all these enrichment classes to get you ready for Harvard or Princeton or Yale or whatever. Well, you're not having any fun either. And we've talked earlier in the semester about stress this causes in children of meritocracy, the elite students who are under so much pressure because there's so much money being spent on them, so much pressure on them to do well, to succeed, that they're winding up being distraught, using Adderall in order to try and get more time to study and focus, not doing things they actually enjoy. Worse, once they get out of school, it doesn't necessarily get better. The book previously talked about cases like lawyers at white shoe law firms, right? So you go to law school, you don't go to law school thinking, wow, I want to make contracts for big companies. No, you want to help people probably. And sure, you want to make money, but you want to help people. You want to do things that are important. You study law, you want to do First Amendment law or environmental law, whatever it is. Instead, you're going to write contracts for large companies. And that's all you're going to do all day. And talk about these lawyers who all they care, what they really like is the 5% of their time that they're allowed to spend on pro bono cases when they can do First Amendment law or helping people who've been wrongly convicted. They can do that for 5% of their time. So they're going to work 100-hour week and they can spend 5 hours a week doing this cool stuff that they really want to do. And the other 95 hours a week doing stuff that actually pays the bills. And the soul crushing work they don't really want to do, but they have to do. So imagine you're that lawyer. You spent decades going through schools, working as hard as anyone possibly goes to school, having all this education training shoved down your skull in order to get to a white shoe law firm where now you need to keep on working that hard. You still don't get to do anything you want to do. You don't get to see your family and friends. You don't get to do the law you actually work. It's like a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie. So it's hurting those people as well. Finally, the Meritocracy Trap book is arguing, is hurting everyone else. Because there's no way that someone who's getting an investment of $12,000 a year here in New Jersey, maybe as much as $20,000 a year, you're getting $20,000 a year human capital investment in you. How are you going to compete with someone who's getting a $100,000 capital investment? There's no way to do it. Yeah, if you're very smart, 1 in 100,000 of you can go to Harvard and compete with everyone else. Maybe you can make it. But for most people, you just don't have a chance. And so we get this increasing degree of inequality, right? Where there's these big differences between the people who get these enormous investments in human capital and the people who just don't. And that winds up being bad, the book is saying, for everybody. It's also bad because it contributes to political and social polarization. That your life experience and life experience of someone who's getting that sort of human capital investment are remarkably different. Right? They're so different. They are as different from you as your life experiences for someone growing up in the developing world in a one-room schoolhouse. And this means that we don't necessarily, as a society, all have the same views or wind up with the same outcomes anymore. We don't have the same. We don't know what it's like to be them. They don't know what it's like to be us. Our worlds are so different that we can't even necessarily talk to each other anymore. And the fact that we've got this sort of inequality, we can see right now, as we're going through this coronavirus outbreak, why this is a problem. Because it means there are lots of people who don't have healthcare. What are they supposed to do? Lots of people who have jobs where they can't afford to miss a couple weeks of pay. Now, that's normal for America. But the people who are actually in charge, right, the people in Congress, people making decisions, the lobbyists, have never experienced that. So they don't necessarily know what that's like. And it's hard for them, because they are dominantly people in power, to craft decisions for the rest of us, right? Saying, well, okay, just wait it out for a couple months, with no idea that for an average American family, you can't wait it out for a couple months. The disconnect between the low end and the high end is just so great that we can't even necessarily understand each other. I think this also leads to one more thing I want to bring up, which is that the book talks about, is about college completion rates. So if you're going to a very elite school, now FDU is a pretty good school, right? We're a solid school. At FDU, our education in you per year is going to be somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 per year, depending which program you're in, what sort of skills you're getting. If you're in the FAS program, for instance, actually it's going to be significantly higher. We're actually spending a lot more money on you. But we're going to be investing a lot of money in you. And that means that you're going to be more likely to actually finish college. If you're in a school where the classes are really huge, you're in a school with 500 people in each class, taking your intro classes in a auditorium, basically a movie theater, well, there's going to be a lot smaller investment in you. And because of that, you are going to be less likely to finish college. In addition, or at least finish college in a timely manner in 4 years. Wealthy kids are much more likely to do it. And part of that is the extra investment that we're giving them, right? They've got advisors and instructors and more help. Part of that is the study skills they picked up along the way, right? They've had decades of training in how to do school that we just don't get anywhere else. And part of it is also the lack of stress. As many of you are experiencing right now, there's a real problem, right? If you are having to deal with your family's financial stress or your own financial stress or difficult living situations, well, that's going to make it harder for you to finish college in 4 years. And because of that, right, they've got this start in inequality. Even if everyone gets into college at the same time, the people who are wealthy are going to wind up finishing earlier and getting a head start on everyone else. Also, the point, one of the big things that college does for you is build networks, right? You meet people, and those people are going to help you out for the rest of your life. Well, if you're going to an elite school, you're going to meet people who are much wealthier and much more better off and better connected, and they're going to help you a lot more than if you were, over a Drew and you wind up having to just deal with people who are a Drew for the rest of your life. All right. The bottom line here, the big takeaway here is this distinction between structuring the economy around capitalism and structuring society around capitalism. And what this chapter is talking about is what happens when we make education structured around capitalism, around your parents' ability to access capital, access money. Now, they're going to get better education, but it doesn't mean that they're intrinsically better. And we have this idea that people went to Harvard, well, they're just the smart kids. And that's not true. And that's what the book is pointing out. It's not that they're better than you in any way, Rather, it's that they've had decades of people spending enormous amounts of money on them in order to get them prepared for that. And that is just not open to most people. I mean, the book talks about by the time someone is in their mid-20s with an elite graduation from college, the human capital investment in them might have been as much as $10 million. Now think about it, your parents couldn't afford to invest in $10 million just in your education. And that's out of reach for almost everyone. But it's in reach for very elite people. Now, again, as I said, that's not good for anybody. No one's being benefited by this. It's a pie eating contest, the prize is more pie. But it also means that it excuses inequality. Right? The book argues that because we say, oh, they didn't inherit their wealth, rather they got it, right? They earned it because they got into these great schools. But they did inherit it, right? They inherit it through that human capital, right? Rather than just inheriting cash directly, they're inheriting the human capital investment that lets them have all of these amazing outcomes that are out of reach for the rest of us. All right. That's all for now. I'll be posting questions related to this in a little bit. Thank you all, and we'll be streaming again pretty soon. Thanks.